Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. My name is Andrew Johnson. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'm joined today by a quorum of our committee members. Those are Council Vice President Jenkins, Council Member Warsame, Council President Bender, and Council Member Schrader. We also are joined today by a number of colleagues who are normally not on this committee, but are here for a presentation. We have Council Members Cunningham, Fletcher, and Cano. So welcome to the IGR committee. We have 3 items on our agenda today, 1 consent and 2 discussion. We'll just quickly get the consent item over with here. It's a contract amendment with Lockridge, Grindle, Nowen, PLLP, the Federal Relations Group for Federal Representation Services, authorizing an extension to a contract and receiving and filing the Ethics Officer's report. Do I see any discussion from committee members on those items? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Now, we have 2 items for discussion on our agenda, but we are joined today by students from across the city of Minneapolis at this really historic moment in both our city, state, and nation, where we have young leaders rising up and speaking up on behalf of one another. And what I'm going to do as chair of this committee is take the next 15 minutes or so and have representatives from these schools come and speak to us and formally address the council so that we have your voices on record. So if we could have our representatives, please, from the schools, approach the microphones and say your name. Welcome.
Hello, Mr. Counselor and the rest of you. My name is Amir Rasami. I'm a senior at South High School. I represent South High School. That may be a discussion. But I stand here with my fellow students to discuss a problem that's basically an infection in our country. That's obviously gun violence. Since the beginning of this year, we've had nearly 40 school shootings, and we've lost many kids. Now, many of those individual school shootings we lose 1 student or 2 students. But obviously, the tragedy that happened in Parkland, 17 students killed by a 19-year-old kid, 19 years old. He's not even old enough to drink. He's not even old enough to be an Uber driver, but he's old enough to get an AR-15, and he's not old enough to get a handgun. Now, I do not know much about gun politics, but I do know about common sense. If a 19-year-old kid can get an AR-15 and not a handgun, then something's wrong with the gun laws in this country. And ever since the tragedy last week, we've had protests all over the country from major cities like New York and LA and in Philadelphia, and obviously in Florida, where students from that school and surrounding schools have enough of the pathetic arguments they hear from either side of the political aisle. It's a gun problem, it's a mental health problem. And that's the thing about the mental health problem I want to discuss. Last year, President Trump, he rolled back an Obama-era regulation that made it harder for people with mental health issues to get guns. So in a way, the blood of these innocent kids are on our president's hands, and not just his, but Congress, members of the Republican Party, members who get donations for their campaigns from the NRA. And they say it's a mental health issue, but they made it easier for mentally ill people to get guns. So we cannot so many students across the country cannot take it anymore. We need actual action. We need actual discussions. You can't have many mass shootings and not say it's a gun problem, because at that point you're caring more about yourselves. You're caring more about the NRA, not you members, but just members who say that it's not a gun problem. Because they're afraid of the NRA. They know that they get millions of dollars in their campaigns for the Senate, for the House of Representatives. They get millions of dollars for their campaigns. And I remember one senator, he was for the NRA. He spoke for gun control, and he lost a re-election in his state. That just shows how powerful the NRA is, how they can basically buy and own congressmen people. It's in a way, it's like the NRA has Congress on a chokehold. So that's why, on behalf of South High School and just South High School and many other representatives of the schools, we say that we need actual action from Congress people, senators, representatives who are not afraid of the NRA. Even if it's not just representatives, senators, even members like you here in the council, who I would say would agree with me about we need stronger gun control laws. We need actual action from any kind of elected official to do something about this, because we can't keep having kids from schools from past decades and generations across the country dying, from Columbine to Sandy Hook to Virginia Tech to Aurora to Orlando to Las Vegas to Sutherland Spring, Texas. I could go on, but I need to shave. The point is we need actual gun laws. We need actual regulation to make sure that this country is safe for our schools and for our communities.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Iris Fassiober. I'm representing Washburn High School. Gun violence in the United States results in tens of thousands of deaths and injuries annually. Just 7 weeks into 2018, there have been 8 school shootings at U.S. schools that have resulted in injury or death. Less than a month ago, a 15-year-old student opened fire at a school in Kentucky, leaving 2 students dead and 18 injured. That shouldn't even be possible that he killed that many people at all with a gun. Even bringing guns on a school property is just beyond me. In early February, one of the students in Los Angeles was shot in the head and another in the arm when a gun concealed in a fellow student's backpack went off. People should not be allowed to have guns, especially if they don't pass a mental test, an age requirement, a training class, and shouldn't be allowed to have any assault rifle of any kind. An assault rifle should not be in a civilian's hands. It is just not for people in cities to have. I should not have to be scared for my 11-year-old brother's life, his friends, my peers, my teachers, my friends, or my life while walking in the halls or sitting in class. We should all have the right to sit in class and learn, walk through the halls with our friends, watch our peers have a good day without the fear of some other person or peer to walk in and shoot up the school, killing a dozen or more of us. I get that hunting is a thing and people feel more safe with a gun in their nightstand, but no assault rifle should be in the hands of a civilian. Enough is enough. How many students, teachers have to die? How many mothers are not able to say goodbye to their worlds before you see that owning an assault rifle is not right and not even being checked for mental status, age, or knowing how to work it? Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to notice that we've been joined by Council Members Ellison, Gordon, and also Mayor Fry. Please.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Fedon Urokondo. I am representative from Southwest. I came up to talk because we've seen this happen before with multiple shootings, and then the debate steers away from the shootings and starts talking about political views. And what I want to make sure doesn't happen is that the deaths that happened don't get clouded by the I like Trump, I don't like Trump debate. This is not about who our president is. This is not about whether or not it's a Republican or a Democrat. This is about children dying. This is about children who got up that day, decided they wanted to go to school to get an education, and they ended up dying for it. Every day you hear people talk about, hey, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Okay, that's an argument. But if someone doesn't have a gun, they don't have the capability to kill unless they go out to stab someone. And if you're going to stab someone, you'll get one person before the cops start showing up. I personally am sick and tired of people dying every single day just so they're not talked about after 2 weeks. Gun violence has become normalized in this country to the point where you hear about a school shooting, you grieve about it for about 3 days, you post it on your Facebook or your Instagram, you hear about it in the news for a week, and then it's gone and nothing happens. I'm sick and tired of nothing happening. I'm sick and tired of innocent people dying, and I want it to stop. Now, my friend Colin, more the statistic guy, he's going to come up and tell you a little something that he needs to say. So, here you go.
Welcome.
Yeah. My name is Colin Robinson. I'm the Minneapolis Public Schools Citywide Student Body President. I just wanted to quickly say that I appreciate you all opening up this meeting and allowing for students to hear it. And I know that this convening is not the one that's going to end the epidemic that our country is facing. But what I will tell you is that as students from across Minneapolis, that we look to you all, the leaders of our city, to be the champion of our message. There are students who walked out of middle school today to come spread what they were trying to say. And that is that when they walk into middle school, there should be no doubt in their mind that they should have to feel for their life when they walk into the class. And so you're not our state legislators. You're the ones that represent us in the city, and passing an ordinance it's just not feasible. But we look for you all, those in positions of power, to be the champion of what we're trying to say. And the underlying message is that we don't want to be fearful in our schools. We go there to learn. That's the point of it. And the fact that that's on our backs and that's on students' backs. And it's said before and it's said again, a bullet doesn't discriminate. That all of the students in Minneapolis look to you all to be the ones championing our voices and our concerns. And so we appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amani Samuels, and I go to De La Salle High School, and I'm also a member of the safety committee for the Minneapolis Youth Congress. And I just wanted to come up here and just talk about how, as you can see, hundreds of students from across the city got together today with one voice, not just to mourn the tragedy in Florida, but also to shed light onto this epidemic that's been going on in our country for years. And I know that we've been talking about schools, and it's not okay at all that we should be fearful of our lives in schools, but it's also not okay that that people are fearful of their lives in their neighborhoods. And I personally, as a resident of North Minneapolis, my entire life have lived in an area that's ridden with gun violence, and it's not okay anywhere. No matter the color of your skin, the age of you, where you're from, what country you're from, no matter what, your sexuality, anything like that, you should not be afraid of being murdered by a gun. And I just think it's such an important message. And in times like these, where we're mourning such a huge tragedy, it's times where people step up. And right now you're seeing all these youth of Minneapolis stepping up to share a message and to make huge changes. And I know that we're in a time of a pivotal change in our nation, and I'm really excited about it. And thank you so much for listening to us and hearing us out. And on behalf of everyone in Minneapolis and all the youth of Minneapolis, we really want to see this change. And we don't want to be mourning for any more losses of children or babies or adults, anyone in any part of the city, in any part of the state, in any part of the country, any part of the world. And so we want to make this change. And coming out here today is just showing that we're serious about it. And youth's voices are very important. And gun violence is not okay. And it's going to end soon. Thank you.
My name is Lixie Tiempos Garcia, and I go to Roosevelt High School in 11th grade. Why you guys don't stuff like the gun stuff and don't like possibly like why the guy got the gun, and then in school you guys should have like police officer outside of the school be for safety, and then to check like you have like guns in school, you have to check like possibly to not be scared or to not be like shocked, or you have first of all you have to call your mom. Your mom say, "Are you okay?" Stuff to not be worried what happened, and then I'm sad for the people who passed away. I had a family over there. That's all.
Hi, my name is Layla Chaplin. I am another student representing Southwest High School. And I would also like to thank you guys for all hearing us out and allowing us to speak. And I also want to mention all of the other students that are here supporting us today. And I also want to say that in this day and age, we should do something about gun laws, because there have been so many incidents where people have died, not even just at schools, but like just in general because of gun violence and other things like that. And I just personally, I think it's a little bit crazy that at the age of 18, you can buy an AR-15 or any assault rifle for that matter. And especially considering, I mean, we're not in a war zone right now. We don't need something with that much firepower. And it's just not something that should be legal. And personally, I also think that there should be more rigorous testing when it comes to like buying guns. And there at least needs to be some sort of like mental health test and other things like that, just because there are so many people in the US, and not just in the US, but all over, that are able to get these guns when they really shouldn't due to mental illness and other things like that. And it's also just very scary as a high school student. Like, I don't want to, like, I go to school to learn. I go to school because I enjoy learning and I want to pursue my career and I want to pursue my education. And I shouldn't have to worry about if today is going to be my last when I step into school. School is supposed to be a safe space for some of these kids. And a lot of these kids might have like rough homes, and school is kind of like the one place that they can go where they feel safe. And now at this point, we don't even feel safe. And it's also just a little bit shocking how many school shootings we've had so far in 2018. And it's very scary. And we also have to wonder how many more students and how many more staff and how many more teachers are going to have to die before something changes. That's all.
I want to recognize we've been joined by Councilmember Palmisano. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Gabe. I'm from South High School, and I'm a member of Young People's Action Coalition, which is a citywide student group. And thank all of y'all for coming out today to listen to the youth. That's really awesome. And it's so sad what's happening in Florida and gun violence in our communities. But one thing I would ask y'all to look at is expand your conception of what gun violence is. So when you guys don't have control over gun laws, sadly, and we wish you did, but you do have control over the MPD, and you do have control over other ways that violence operates in our communities. No student should be scared when they're going to school or walking the streets. So we should think about how we can make a police department that makes schools safer for students, that does not scare students in schools. If you can move beyond gun violence simply as a lone shooter and towards part of larger things and look at this tragedy as a way to look into ourselves, I think that we can look at the MPD and look at SROs as ways that schools are not safe, and expanding that conception is a movable step that y'all can take that would make this city and schools safer for all students.
Thank you. Well, I greatly appreciate the powerful comments and everybody who's come out here today. I know we have some council members that are interested in an amendment to our legislative agenda, but first I want to invite up, we'll take comments from another student, and then I'll invite up Jean Ranieri of our Intergovernmental Relations Department to explain our current policy positions around gun control, how we advocate at the state capitol, and then we'll take up that matter. Yes, welcome.
Hello, thank you. Welcome to being in a large room of teenagers. We really appreciate being here, and we appreciate you being here and listening to us. I have, I think, a different experience than a lot of the people in public schools. I go to an alternative school, Lauren Nicollet Alternative School, and in the past I've been to charter schools. And my name's Alana, and I've had the unique situation where there's been an active shooter within a mile of my school, and no one thought to warn us. Because we were such a small school, they forgot we were there, which isn't necessarily a policy issue that we need to bring up right now. But I think it's important to note that when we got a gun threat at my school, with a person saying, a school member saying that he was going to bring in a gun and personally kill our head of school, that was because he had an access to a weapon from a personal sale from a family friend. He bought a gun from a family friend legally because he was 18 and decided that that's what he was going to do with it. So I think that a lot of the times we say mental health checks, background checks, ban certain pieces of hardware, and that's really important. But at gun shows and through private sales, you don't need those things right now. When you go to a gun shop, they do run a background check. It's not particularly thorough, but it's run. Private sales and gun shows are very different. And I think that if any message we need to take away today, it is that change needs to come in different places than it has before. Because what we've been legislating thus far obviously isn't working. And as a person with mental illness, it's just saying get a mental health test isn't enough. You have to specifically regulate what issues do we need to look for? What kind of mental health care do we need to implement? Because when you say mental health test, what does that mean? Half the people in this room have most likely been diagnosed with ADHD. Like, if you've been diagnosed with ADHD, if you're comfortable, please raise your hand. That's mental health. If you've been diagnosed with any other kind of minor mental disorder, raise your hand. That's not saying that none of us should be able to buy firearms if we're not safe. It's saying that we know that we need dangerous people not to be allowed to have guns. And we'd appreciate it if you keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear a brief presentation on what the city's current gun control efforts are. Mr. Ranieri, thank you for joining us.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. My name is Gene Ranieri. I'm Director of Government Relations for the city. And annually we adopt a legislative agenda. That agenda includes items that deal with the city and the state of Minnesota. They run all the way from finance to housing. And we have a rather long policy on gun violence and responsible gun ownership. And I think I'll get to the computer in a second. But what we do is we work with the committee, work with city staff, and come up with policies relate to this issue. And I'm pretty technically. There we go. I got it right here. Thank you. Oh, I don't have it. I guess I'm going to have to go without. Mr. Chairman, I do have hard copies we can hand out.
No worries.
Okay.
Please. We'll just, yeah.
What we have in our policies are several policies dealing with relationship with the state. One is we'd like to see state law amended to allow local jurisdictions to implement gun violence laws that are different from the state, maybe a little stronger. And that's sort of like the ability for us to go beyond what state law can do. We also believe there should be discretionary power to local governments to grant or deny firearms permits. We also think there should be temporary revocation to permit to carry in certain situations. Right now, permit to carry is an issue where we have a 5-year a 5-year limit. What's being proposed in state law now is to make it timeless, and we have concerns about that. We also believe that there should be some legislation dealing with gun violence prevention measures that support reasonable gun ownership. Mandatory reporting of lost or stolen firearms, which is our first item. Mandatory reporting laws regulating the transfer of firearms, which we heard from our students just a few minutes ago. Strengthening laws requiring criminal background checks on all gun sales. Again, heard from the students a few seconds ago. The prohibition of possessing replica guns in public and restricting the access of illegal guns to young people. And we go on, and one of the other things we suggest in our policies is that we support research on gun violence. A couple of years ago, we proposed as part of our federal program a similar language, because right in federal law, there is a prohibition for the Center for Disease Control to do research on gun violence. And we would like to see some sort of gun violence education and research done here in Minnesota. We also have two things at the bottom of our agenda that really address some new topics that are coming in. I just mentioned permitless carry. The other one is the stand your ground legislation, where folks could basically, it's the castle doctrine. And that legislation was introduced last year, and it didn't go, I don't think it went anywhere, but it's still out there. So, Mr. Chairman, we have a fairly complex, comprehensive gun policies. Unfortunately, as students were saying, there are other forces who are up against us, and there's been lots of no action, not only in our legislature, but across the country and in Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Ranieri. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Mr. Ranieri, I want to thank you for this agenda and as well as your team. And I think I want to thank all the students for coming out today. We in elected office need to show that we're listening through action, and I hope this is a small step forward. I also want to bring forward a motion to amend the agenda. Colleagues at your desk, we have an amendment that I'm bringing forward with Councilmember Fletcher, who I want to thank for his leadership on this issue. For the public, I'll read the entire text of the statement, which is amending the City of Minneapolis legislative agenda and policy position document on page 5, after the last bullet. In the public safety and criminal justice reform section, and on page 13, inserting the second bullet in the gun violence prevention and responsible gun ownership section to read as the following: supporting legislation that bans the sale statewide of assault weapons, bump stocks, silencers, and extended magazines.
Excellent. We've got a motion by Councilmember Schrader. Second. Councilmember Fletcher is a co-author on this. Did you want to say anything? Do you have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So I want to thank Gene Ranieri and his colleagues in IGR for working with me on this. I started calling, and I want to thank Susan Siegel in the city attorney's office. I started calling to find out what can we do. And at just about every turn, we get the frustrating answer that state law has really boxed us in and prohibited us from passing our own sensible gun laws that would make sense for our city. And so as we continue to look for ways that we can sort of cut in around the edges, this was one thing that was particularly aligned with the demands that students have brought to us today. This is one thing that affirms the thing that I think all of us really want to say, and that I think was here and present today, which is we're in a fight with the NRA. We're in a position today where the NRA is imposing a set of laws on us that are making our city more violent. And I take very seriously the point that we need to think about gun violence broadly. So much of our MPD policy is rooted in the possibility that anyone they encounter on the street might have a gun, that the prevalence of guns around this city shapes the way we police, it shapes the way we run a lot of our city policy, it shapes the way we think about security. And there is an awful lot that we could change if we could start to address the availability of guns in our city. And I think it's very important that we affirm today, as everybody here has asked us to, that we are in a fight with the NRA. I've been reflecting on your lifetimes and what it's meant. I'm of the last generation that didn't have this in high school. Columbine was really the moment of shift. It happened in 1999 while I was in my early 20s. How many of you were born after 1999? Yeah. So almost all of you have lived in a permanent state of this being part of your lives. 10 years later, in 2008, there was a shooting in Oxnard, California at E.O. Green Junior High. An incidence of transphobia. A boy named Lawrence King was shot, and I know the impact that that had on that community because my mother was one of the teachers at that school. And I've watched her struggle with that trauma to support those students and to live with it herself. watching that happen. And so this is something that starting in 1999, we've seen this become a part of our culture. 10 years later, we've seen it normalized. We've seen it be something that made the news for a little while and kind of about the wrong things. And now in Parkland, it's happening again, and it is time for it to stop. And I hope that today this acknowledges the energy that you all brought and the importance of the issue and our ability to get something done and to start to insist in a different way and in a more powerful way that our state needs to take action and do better for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Chair Johnson, for opening up our meeting today to the young people. And thank you so much for coming today. You have given us all so much hope and energy and drive to keep fighting for you. I've been on the city council for 4 years, and this is the first time I've seen so many young people come to City Hall and insist that your voices are heard. You should keep marching and insisting, but know that you are welcome here anytime. And I know we all took to heart all of your comments about feeling safe, not only in your schools, but in every parts of your lives. And we are working on so many things that touch your lives and that are going to matter for your future here in this room week after week. And we need you to help us figure out how to solve all of these problems. We spend a lot of money, for example, on our police department, and we're working really hard to make it something that serves all of you well, that makes you feel safer in your communities. We also spend a very little amount of money, in my opinion, on violence prevention programs that are helping get guns off of the street in new and innovative ways. But we need your help to shape those programs, to make the case for them, to really make our work, again, work for you and serve your futures. So I just want you to know how much your voice matters to us. We want you to keep coming and getting involved. We'll come to you if that works better. We want you to vote. We want you to call us and email us, find out who your council member is, build relationships with us, and we're here to work for you. So thank you for coming today. Please keep coming back.
Thank you. Thank you. Any additional comments from council members? Yes. Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. And, I just want to echo much of what's been said today, but really just acknowledge the spirit and the determination that it takes to stand up and be a part of our democracy. You guys remind me of my first act of activism when I was a sophomore in high school in 1974. And we walked out of our school because we wanted to have a Black History Month celebration at our school. And this is when Black History Month was actually Black History Week. It hadn't even become a full month of acknowledgement. But, up until that point, our principal had said, no, we're not going to have any type of celebration and acknowledgement of that. And so we walked out of school, and consequently we were able to have that celebration in our assembly hall at the school. And so marching matters, protest matters. I really want to echo something that I think Gabe said, and I know many of you have indicated sort of an intersectional lens to these issues. And Gabe talked about that this is broader than just a gun violence in the schools issue. It's gun violence in our churches, gun violence in the movies, gun violence in our neighborhoods. And so, I believe from what I've heard in the news media, and I see some people here, that the Women's March was helpful for helping this happen. And I know Black Lives Matters activists are marching with students all over the country. So I want to encourage you to continue to think about this as broadly as possible. All of these issues are interconnected. And if we can, if we end sort of this very visceral and physical violence, we still have a lot of emotional and other kinds of violence that happens in our communities. And I just hope that you young people can see all of the interconnections. There's economic violence that happens in our world. There's domestic violence that happens in our homes. There's all of these other issues, and really hope that you can think and act more broadly, more intersectional around these issues. And so thank you guys for coming out today. It's very impactful. It's very powerful. And the work and the struggle continues. And I'm happy to be on that journey with you guys. So thank you.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to co-sign everything that my colleagues have said, but then also add that it's not only hope that you guys are giving to this group. I've seen some really hard leadership in this room as well. There was a moment where the young gentleman with the Gumby cut, man, that hairstyle was like really rocking. But I don't know where he went, but he said, you know, this isn't a Democrat and Republican issue, or this shouldn't be a partisan issue. And in my mind, initially, I was like, man, how not? You know, like that's how these conversations go. You got people on the left, people on the right, and we fight in this partisan way. And it just reminded me that every single time we think that we've pushed this term progressive to the limits, right? Folks like yourselves come and show us that we don't have a big enough ask, right? I want you guys to continue challenging this notion that this conversation has to be put in this binary way. I also want to thank the young man who said, you know, this is bigger than that, right? That police violence is not a separate issue from the larger gun violence narrative, that it's a larger part of the phenomenon of violence that we're experiencing here in the United States. And then lastly, the young woman who's like utilizing crowd participation. I mean, like, you know, how old are you? Run for something, right? Because you guys are going to be, you guys have demonstrated some really hard leadership today. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that and continue to ask you guys to not be relegated as students or just, you know, doing your darndest, but like to really continue to push us and to demand more and to ask and to imagine a bigger ask for people like us and beyond. So thank you.
Any other comments from colleagues? I'll just add a couple of my own real quick. You know, when you all were marching here, I pulled up the local news site to see your progress and to see the helicopter shots. And there were two other headlines on there. One is that today they thwarted an attempted school shooting in another state. And the other is that in our own state, Orono, the school district was put on lockdown because of threats of violence. And this is not normal. This is not normal at all. And I grew up in a time when Columbine was just happening, and I was in school when that had happened, and it shocked the nation because we never had anything to that degree and that severity. And the fact that now schools are actively drilling students and preparing students for these events is just unacceptable. And it's a failure of the nation to protect its students. And so you have come in here and brought your message that this is no longer tolerable, that enough is enough. And it has been a privilege and a pleasure to welcome you to City Hall and to listen to you today. You said it better than anybody could on these issues. I hope the media is going to go home and broadcast that out as well, because you're representing not just Minneapolis here, you're representing the whole state here. And when you go home tonight, and after we vote on this motion, you're able to say, hey, look, because we marched, because we spoke up, the city of Minneapolis passed into its policies and it's officially backing an assault weapons ban across the whole state, along with other things. Now, you're gonna celebrate that, right? But you need to continue that fight and keep pushing. I hope this gives you the energy, and we'll be right there with you. Mayor Fry said it. we've got your backs. And so we'll be right there with you at the Capitol. But that's where we need you next with this backing. You'll have the city's support as well. And let's go get some state laws changed on this. So. And yes, Councilmember Gordon.
Sorry, and I missed part of the discussion, but we're talking about going to the Capitol, and it just reminded me that it's 2018, that there's some elections going on, and what really happens is commitments you can get out of people before they get elected, or who they see helping them get elected. And as we're doing that, I mean, there's potential for big changes in the state legislature. And I know this isn't necessarily a partisan issue. So whatever party it might be, whether it's Democrats or Green Party who are running for these offices, challenge them, get involved in campaigns. If we can elect people to those places, it makes the effort to go back and lobby much easier because there are already people who share our values and who'll fight for what we believe in.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you are a student at Patrick Henry or North High or live in North Minneapolis, could you raise your hand? All right. I just wanted to say that we are your council members, and I know I speak on both of our behalves that we are incredibly proud. I'm sorry that I stepped out, but I wanted to circle back and say that we are so proud of you to be here and for making your voice heard and making sure that gun violence, we are having a bigger conversation about it, not just at schools, but out in the community as well. So thank you so much, and we're really proud of you.
All right. Any further discussion? Any other council members, mayor, anyone else? All right, not seeing any. We do have a motion before us to add to our legislative agenda, supporting legislation that bans the sale statewide of assault weapons, bump stocks, silencers, and extended magazines. I'm not seeing any additional discussion. So all those in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion carries. Perfect. And now we do have two other items on our agenda for discussion, but we will just take a brief 2 or 3 minute recess here. So if any students need to leave, now we are moving beyond the gun control portion of the committee meeting. So thank you for being here. So well.
Fair enough. Oh, I am happy to. Sorry, I don't know where the
That's like I gave it to him. It worked out. Yeah. It's okay. Thanks for bringing this up. I know.
All right.
Hey, man.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and resume our committee meeting and return from this recess. And we have two additional items on our agenda, two discussion items. The first item up will be the 2018 legislative agenda and policy positions, which we just added an amendment to. And please, Ms. Bergman, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Sasha Bergman with the IGR department. Online available with the RCA is our proposed amendments to the 2018 legislative agenda and policy positions. There's also copies up, I think, at the clerk's desk. So there's kind of, the changes here are sort of twofold. The first is that we are recommending combining the legislative agenda and policy positions into one document. This is mostly just for ease of making amendments to it. It's something that we had worked with the clerk's office on. And I think for purposes of messaging our 2018 agenda, for example, we can still include that separately on our website and things of that nature, but just for paperwork purposes, I think it's easier to combine them. And then the other two sort of sets of changes throughout this document are making more technical tweaks and also kind of refining statements to make sure that the statement in the policy position aligns well with the statement in the legislative agenda and that they're using similar language, so sort of technical in that way. And then if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I could briefly walk through some of the more substantive recommended additions and deletions in the document.
That sounds good.
Great. So the first one that I would point to is on page 8. At the bottom there, we recommend deleting support for an increase in the existing transit improvement tax by 3/4 of a cent. This is sort of irrelevant now, I think, because CTIB disbanded in June, and so that the statement that had been there previously was related to the existing county tax that was in place prior to then. The next significant change I would point out is on page 14, just recommending deletion of the policy related to common interest communities. This was also called the condo bill last session, but we overlooked the fact that this had been accomplished last session, so we probably should delete it from our agenda. And then on page 15, more specifically calling out support for housing infrastructure bonds for affordable housing and general obligation bonds for public housing rehabilitation, and sort of separating that out from appropriations just for clarity purposes. On page 16, under public health funding and policy, we recommend addition of two statements in the public health funding and policy section related to opioids. The first proposal would be related to supporting prevention and treatment interventions, and then the second statement is related to funding for Narcan and providing statewide training for public safety personnel to help with those efforts across the state. If there are more specific questions about that, Mr. Ranieri could address those. On page 17, under the eliminating health disparities and closing the health equity gap, we just recommend adding a more specific reference to a strategy related to HIV and STD prevention and control to support including PrEP strategies, pre-exposure prophylaxis. And Allison Nessie from the IGR department is here if there are more specific questions about that addition. And I think finally, on page 18, the other more substantive recommendation is related to our proposal that supports state funding for research and training for public and private applicators of chloride-containing de-icing chemicals. This would be to add a statement in support of legislation that would address liability concerns of private applicators. And this is an effort that's kind of come up more recently, but it's related to our existing statement. And Katrina Kessler from Public Works would be here to answer any questions about that statement, if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members? Not seeing any. Thank you, Ms. Bergman. I appreciate the work on this document and making the changes both to the agenda and also combining the two documents together. I will go ahead and move approval of the technical updates and combining the two. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion carries. Thank you. And moving on to our final discussion item, a federal, state, local legislative update. Mr. Ranieri.
Mr. Chairman and members, will be brief. The legislature did convene yesterday. There were some hearings over the last 2 days. Most were briefings on tax conformity and the federal tax law and how Minnesota will conform to that. Also, there were some hearings also today on the SCORE tax, which is for solid waste and recycling. The counties are active in trying to increase the funding for that, but it's been very slow. Today, the House members were at a training session on sexual harassment and all day, and then there will be some hearings tomorrow. We probably don't see a lot of activity starting until next week. That's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Ranieri. Not seeing any discussion from committee members, so I'll move that we receive and file the update and reports. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.